Hello and welcome to the Pig and Whistle Tales from Azeroth. As always, here at the Pig and Whistle in Stormwind, I chat through a variety of subjects with regards to World of Warcraft, both classic and retail. So grab a bottle or a pint, sit back and enjoy. Today's subject is all about classic versus retail. Now this is a discussion that I'm kind of a bit late to, but this is because the podcast only started a few months back now. This discussion would have been happening over a year ago now. Literally about a year ago, when people started to get into classic and they really got to, delve into everything to do with classic and can compare it to retail instead of just knowing and all hearsay from before. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. There's a few main concepts that differ from classic and retail, and we'll be going over them. The first one is obviously the community within both of them. Now, with classic, it's your realm and your realm only, so you build a reputation within that realm, and you see the same people possibly every day, every week. You'll know the same names. You'll know the names when people speak of them in trade chat, in looking for group. You know many different names and their reputation behind that name. Compared to retail, this isn't really a thing in retail. Now, you obviously have your guild. You have any sort of community that you've joined, stuff like that. But you don't see anyone twice. It's quite rare to jump into a dungeon group and suddenly you say, oh, I know you, I've done a dungeon with you a couple of weeks ago, and then one at the very start of WoW Classic, stuff like that. I could name the entire group that I had for my very first dungeon in Classic. I couldn't tell you the name of my group I had in the first, in Shadowlands, and that was I did that yesterday, my very first Shadowlands dungeon, and yet I did my very first dungeon in WoW Classic over a year ago. So it's a bit ridiculous, really. That could also be down to a couple of them were in my guild, and so that always helps. But you always remember the people that you did dungeons with, you've interacted with in the past. You've seen a funny moment happen with them. You've seen them betray someone. You've seen them kill someone for you. Everything like that. You've seen them steal a mining vein, anything at all. So the community within both of the games differs so much that it gives you a different feel to the game almost. Whereas in with Classic, it is very much community based. Everyone knows everyone. Everyone's built the reputation up. Retail, it is you're getting on with your own thing. You don't even need to interact with people at all. In all honesty, the only interaction you have with them is through the auction house for the most part. That's when you can have the most interaction with someone. Unless, like I said, you are in a guild and you raid and everything like that. So there are certain exceptions to this. But for the most part, you have a better and more well-known and well-rounded community within the classic. Within the classic community, I didn't want to say community there, not going to lie, but within WoW Classic over retail. Now, another big thing with regards to classic versus retail is questing. So, with questing, in classic, it is very slow. It is your journey to get to 60. Your journey to get to 60 is the main bulk of the game. Maybe at 60 you do some raids and PvP, but a lot of that time is questing. I've had a lot of days game time on my mage as it is, and I think about a third of it is not even at max level. A third of it was about 19 days just game time before I even hit level 60. If I recall correctly. So there is a massive journey when you're going through questing, and it's about your experience, how you want to quest, how slow, how fast you want to go in terms of questing. Do you want to just be boosted through it? Do you want to do loads of dungeons, dungeon crawl? or do you want to experience every quest and get that done? In retail, it is just very... Questing isn't the game, as it were. It isn't your journey to get to 60. It's about the story that they can push within them 10 levels, if that makes sense. So the quests are very lore and story driven. Now there might be some like very lore intensive quests in Classic. If you look at the Scepter of the Shifting Sands quest line, that is very lore intensive because it brings out how they close the gates of Anchorage and you fight like Iranicus and everything like that. So there is quite a lot of lore in Classic, but that gets overshadowed by your actual questing experience and how the quests are perceived in the game itself. Whereas in retail, going back to retail, I have got up 8 levels, or actually 10 levels in about 2 days of game time from 48 to 58 in Shadowlands. Now, this is just from questing normally at the same pace that I would quest in Classic, but instead I would get about 1 level in Classic, possibly, from 48 to 58. 1 level, maybe 2, if I really went for it. But it's not about the actual questing and the journey of questing. It's about how much story they can deliver in each zone and each quest that they give you. So, and for me, this is perfect because I'm an absolute lore freak. I absolutely love everything to do with the lore. I love how story driven it all is. But there needs to be some sort of diversity with it. It needs to be like you have to go off the actual pathway to find these lore, like little Easter eggs, these quests, and really complete the entire story. Whereas the quest line through the zones are all giving you information on what has happened in the zone and what is going to happen. And when you go off and do these side quests, it is just about, it's trying to bring the Classic experience into retail, whereas you're just questing for the journey to get to 60 instead of for the lore, because all the lore and the story stuff is in the main story or main quest line, if that makes any sense. I could have gotten a bit confusing there, but I hope that makes sense. Again, I'm a massive fan of this because I'm a huge lore nerd. I absolutely love the lore that they do with WoW. Every little detail in Classic, at least, like lore-wise, I want to read up and pick up on. Like the Scepter of the Shifting Sands is the example that I gave. It is very lore-heavy and I do love it. And for some people, this makes it really nice. This makes questing more purposeful. Purposeful? It gives it a meaning. I couldn't figure... Is that a word? I don't know. But it gives it a meaning, the questing, to some people. But to other people, it leaves a hole, pretty much. It leaves a hole that needs to be filled because people quested for the journey, like they do in Classic. And they might not be that into lore. They might actually just want to build up their character and say, like, okay, my character's getting more and more powerful. I don't care about the lore. I don't care who's alive, who's doing what in the game. I just want to kill some people because I can and make my character as badass as it can be, almost. So there are some negatives and positives from both Classic and retail. I would honestly... Classic is more grindy in terms of its questing. You really need to set aside a chunk of time and push yourself to get them extra levels and to push your character onto that next stage. Whereas in retail, you can get up a level within an hour easily. Not easily, but within an hour sort of average, I'm like leveling. And I'm just enjoying the story and the lore as I go by. Me leveling isn't even in my mind. It's not like, okay, I need to do 5 bars worth of killing mobs before I can get this next quest, and then like there's no maths involved. It's just I'm gonna go through the like main quest line and I'm going to enjoy the lore, and when I ding, I ding. Honestly, I don't look at my XP bar in retail a lot. I see it at like 25%, 50%, 75% and ding. Like, whereas in Classic, I'm constantly looking at it. I'm like, okay, I've got this amount of rested XP. I can go and kill these guys. They give about 400 XP each. I need about 66 of these mobs to kill. I would only kill about 20, therefore I need to hand in this quest. So, like, you can see how that gets a bit grindy, and it's like, okay, I really need to push this. It's taking forever. Like, you can really like wear yourself out. So, going back and forth between Classic and Retail is honestly quite nice, because just you don't have to think as much with Retail. It's almost spoon-fed to you, the questing, and it's nice to relax and just sit back and enjoy the story that is being told to you. And not many people sort of get that about Retail. They want to tell a story through the game, because people won't read the books or they won't read the comics, and they just want to play the game. And you just need to enjoy it, honestly. That's why people don't like questing in Retail for some reason. Or I say they don't enjoy it. Some people don't. Some people absolutely adore it, like myself. But another couple things that differ from Classic and Retail are both Dungeon and PvP. So these are obviously two completely separate things. One of them is PvE, one of them is PvP. So we'll sort of target the Dungeon side first. In Classic, it's long and grindy. Like questing, it's getting the group together, making your way to the dungeon, you know, making your water if you're a mage, getting your reagents to buff people, absolutely everything. It needs to be like fighting your way through some mobs to even get to the dungeon entrance. There's many different things that like could go or that extend the dungeon in Classic. And this makes it really good. It makes it a journey, like the questing. You really want to experience your character gaining in power and making new friends with the community that you're building, getting yourself a reputation. So the dungeons really do sort of link in to both the community and the questing aspect that, like we've talked about just previously, which is great. And it does break up the questing, because it's not just you're going back and forth to a quest giver. You're going through this dungeon with very hard like NPCs, and you and your group have to best them, and it's sort of an immersion thing. Like, I'm going into Shadowfang Keep because there's a Worgen curse and this dude who's leading the Worgen needs to be taken down. Or like you're going into Gnome Ragon to kill the dude who overthrew the gnomes in their capital city, stuff like that. So you are experiencing Dungeons and Classic as a sort of, I'm testing out my power and how powerful I am currently, compared to Retail, where it's nice XP. It sort of breaks up the story a bit. If you're bored with questing, you can just hop into a dungeon quickly with looking for group, and it's just a nice sort of side activity to do whilst you're progressing through the main lore or story in questing. That, and it's just for gear purposes. It, like, gear obviously in Classic dungeons is very useful. You do get some nice pieces of gear, but you're not going in there specifically for some gear. Well, not the lower levels anyway. At the higher levels you possibly are, because that's about getting your best in slot and everything. But in Retail, it's more about, I just want to break up my questing time, and I don't want to be sat here going back and forth and going through this lore and story-driven quests and being almost herded to where I have to be like a sheep. I just want to do some dungeons, get a chunk of XP, and you know, go on my way again, be refreshed for the next batch of questing almost. So that, and the Retail dungeons, like I said, they don't fall into any of these community aspects or the questing aspects, unlike the Classic like dungeons do. I guarantee you that if you were to queue up 100 like Shadowlands dungeons, you would probably be put with you would probably find one person from your very first dungeon once in that entire 100, and you won't even recognise them. That's the thing. You'll be partnered with them again on like your 94th dungeon run, and you won't even recognise them. You'll be like, oh, that's just someone new. You won't even think, wait, I did this dungeon with them like earlier, like a month or so ago. No, you just don't. You just think, okay, new dungeon group. You don't even look at the names. You just really see who's the tank, who's the healer. That's it. And then that's who you're going to blame if someone wipes, pretty much. But it's very nice to just break it up in retail, and you can do as many as you want, as little as you want. But it differs from Classic so much because it's not grindy at all. You can leave whenever you want. You can leave whenever you want in Classic as well, but that ties into the community and the questing aspect. You might not even be high enough level to get more quests, so you might have to persist through this dungeon to get that extra level in Classic. And you can just leave this dungeon on retail, hop straight back out, straight into questing, wait 15 minutes, go straight back into another one. Whereas if you go into a dungeon and leave in Classic, you can possibly find another dungeon, but it would still take you about 15 minutes just to get back to the dungeon that you wanted to do and start all over again. So it's about the journey and how grindy Classic is, because you've got to make your way there, whereas on retail you just take a 15-minute sort of deserter and just go, I'll just try again in 15 minutes. Queue up, hop on in, and hop out at the same location and just carry on. So it's just a chunk of XP that you wanted in the end. Moving on to PvP, there's so many differences with PvP in terms of Classic versus retail. So with retail, before Shadowlands anyway, I have yet to do any Shadowlands PvP, arenas mainly, but retail has gone more in the favour of everyone's got everything. Everyone's got an interrupt, most classes have an execute, most classes have a CC, most classes have like burst damage, you have burst rotation, stuff like that. You have AoE, everything. You've got everything. You've got a little bit of everything in every class. In Classic, it's completely different. You have very unique spells to your class. Paladins have bubble, shamans have their one-shot combo, mages have their one-shot combo, hunters have traps and just sort of one-shot of clothy. Warriors just can't do anything against mages. Mages can't do anything against warlocks. So you have your favourite matchups, you have your least favourite matchups, and it's very bursty. There's rarely a fight that lasts for more than 2 minutes maximum. Honestly, in a 1v1, if a fight lasts for 3-4 minutes, then that is a long fight, and pretty much you guys just aren't doing enough damage. It's that simple. It's very bursty, like I said. Because everyone's got their own strengths and weaknesses, mages can burst, shamans can burst, paladins are more survival and, outlasting their opponent. That's the same with priests, with shields, and they just dot them up. Retail is the complete opposite. It's a lot more balanced. I'm going to say that right now. People don't think it's balanced at all, but from what PvP in Classic is, it's balanced. Like, if you compare the two, it's ridiculous. So, balanced in terms of everything isn't one-shotting. Like, there is a chance to respond to what the other person is doing before you've just been flat out, like, flattened on the ground and you have no chance at all to even react. And I'm going to say this again, and people might disagree with it. Retail PvP is skill-based. It is kind of skill-based. There is that element in Classic where skill does matter. There is a difference between a skilled mage and an awful mage in PvP. There's that difference between a skilled paladin in PvP and an unskilled paladin in PvP. You can say it for everything. But retail is more about the communication and the setup. This is from an arena point of view, by the way. This isn't Battlegrounds or 1v1s for the most part. It's a lot more communication and knowing what your opponent has. And this is how I perceive classic PvP in my mindset. So before classic was even out, I did arenas with my sister who is a priest. We just do 2v2s, disc priest and anything really. I've played a rogue, I've played a mage, I played a druid at one time. So we've kind of mixed it up a bit, and you have to play 4D chess in a way. You've got to think of what the opponent's going to do to you, and you've got to counteract it before they've even done it, if that makes sense. So it's like, okay, he's going to CC my priest here, so I need to start line of sighting around this pillar before they can even do anything and get hold of me until the crowd control on my priest has run out. So you've got to kind of think 5 steps ahead like you do in chess. And I brought this into my classic PvP. So it's quite easy really, because if you bring this skill set into classic PvP, classic is it's a lot simpler in terms of its rotation and the expectation on what the other person's going to do. So if I'm dueling a paladin, the first thing I'll do is poly. The very first thing I'll do is polymorph. Now, they either sit the poly, or they trinket it, or they bubble. If they trinket, you re-poly because they don't have an interrupt. If they bubble, you just run away. You pretty much run away, use your shields until that bubble runs out, and you re-poly. Now, again, this can be interpreted in so many ways, but I always knew what my opponent was going to do before he even done it. That way, I was never caught off guard in any PvP situation, in Classic anyway. In Retail, it's tough to keep up with everyone's abilities now. That's why there's some add-ons with it. Everyone's got an interrupt, so you've got to juke them. So if you're going for a heal, you cast the heal halfway, you move your character, and you move your character to stop the cast as he kicks your spell. So he misses the kick, and you can cast freely without having to worry, or without worrying to be interrupted. Did I say that in the right way, that sentence? I don't know. I don't think I did. But that's where the skill comes in. It's these niche little things that you sort of find within Retail PvP that you wouldn't necessarily in Classic. You wouldn't necessarily find it in Classic, but you would find it in Retail PvP if it's been brought to Classic. So myself, I bring the Duke PvP sort of thing into Classic, where if I'm casting a polymorph and something's about to pummel me like a warrior to interrupt, I'll sidestep, he'll miss the pummel, I get a free polymorph, and he can't do anything about it. It's one of them things. That's what generally wins a mage 1v1, by the way, in PvP. Just in WoW Classic PvP, just saying. So there is a lot more balance, and I believe it's where most of the skill comes from in terms of PvP for Retail. That's why you have the arenas, the Retail arenas. You don't have the WoW Classic arenas. You have the WoW Battleground, like the Battlegrounds, but that's because it's a giant team fight. It's organising your team, to the best that you can. It's not about individual, plays or just, you and a mate versus these other two and outskilling them. That's more team coordinated. Don't get me wrong. Retail coordination in terms of arenas and battlegrounds is still very good. It is still very good and very much up there. Couple small little things, in all honesty. You've got gold, which is a luxury to have in Classic. If you're above 500 gold, you're kind of, quite chilled. You're not in any sort of danger at the moment. You can easily farm that back. Anything below that, and honestly, I'm terrified. But gold in Classic is very much a luxury. You get to, when you want to be lazy, you can. You can just buy the herbs off the auction house. You can buy the potions that you need for raids, stuff like that. In Retail, it's just a number. You open your bags and you just see that number and you think, okay, I've got that much gold. You open your bags again, an hour later, in the same zone, you suddenly got 3,000 more gold somehow. And it's just, I don't know, it's a bit weird. Unless you're really going for something like the Brontosaur in Battle for Azeroth, even though it's gone now, which was 5 million gold, you don't necessarily take a lot, you don't look at your gold a lot. Like, I go to the barbers in WoW and it costs me about 200 gold or something. I don't even realise that. I don't even realise that that 200 gold is gone. Like, I've probably spent so much over the course of my WoW life, and I just don't even realise how much I've spent. It's that ridiculous. Another thing is loot. In Classic, loot is cherished. You remember your loot that you've gotten throughout raids, dungeons. I could probably name you pretty much everything that I'm wearing on my Mage and Classic right now. On retail, I couldn't name you a single item that I have on my Druid, which is my main at the moment. The only thing I can picture is a big Maldraxxus staff, like bony staff, with this green crystal in the middle. That is the only thing I can picture, but I could not name it to save my life. Like, you give me a choice of 10 names, or even like 2 names, I still wouldn't know if one of them was right or not. So it's one of them things. These are just small little things like golden loot and everything. But the big ones are certainly community questing, like the PvE and PvP aspect of it all. But that will do it all for this week. I honestly feel that I had done like a classic versus retail type podcast before, but I went back through it all and apparently I hadn't, and I was quite shocked, in all honesty, because I thought it would be one of the first ones that I did, but hey, here we are. I would like to, as always, give a shout out to the Patreon. It is www.patreon.com/pigandwhistle. If you want to go and show your support for the podcast, please do so there. It is very much appreciated. And we've just had a recent competition on the Pig and Whistle Facebook page. It is closed now, unfortunately. So there will be a winner that is decided within the coming days. I will contact that person via message, so just make sure that you're keeping track of that. But this does not mean don't go and like the Pig and Whistle page. Definitely do, because we would like to do so many more of these competitions in the future. And who knows, you could be the next one to win, and the prizes are definitely worth winning. I will tell you that. It is good fun. It is definitely good fun. Just go and check out the last one and you'll see what you can win. But thank you all very much for watching. Last week I did it again. Thank you all very much for listening, as always. Take care all, and I'll see you in the next one. Go with Valor, friend.